Ma'am, this sector is off limits. The command sliced through the humid air, precise and unforgiving. Standing like a monolith between Brenda and the parade deck was a Marine captain. Every inch of him was regulation perfect, from the razor-sharp crease in his trousers to the name tape stamped Hayes on his chest. He held up a hand, palm out, a universal sign of immovable authority. Brenda offered him a soft, apologetic expression. "I apologize, Captain," she said, her tone gentle. "I was simply hoping to find a spot closer to the formation. My son is graduating this morning." "I understand that," Hayes replied, his voice flat, implying he actually cared very little. "However, this walkway is designated for official personnel only. The civilian observation zone is located behind the grandstands." He jerked his chin vaguely toward the distance, his gaze dissecting her. He didn't see a person. He saw a variable to be controlled. He saw a woman in her 40s, her light brown hair pulled back efficiently to combat the humidity, framing a face with intelligent olive-green eyes. She wore a modest top and jeans, civilian camouflage. To him, she was just another confused mother wandering out of bounds. "Understood," Brenda replied, maintaining her composure. "I'll return to the stands." She pivoted to walk away, intending to de-escalate, but the captain sidestepped, cutting off her retreat. "Ma'am, I need to verify your visitor's pass," Hayes stated, his voice shedding its veneer of politeness and hardening into cold steel. Brenda stopped. A stillness descended upon her, a familiar, suffocating weight. She recognized this specific brand of condescension, the assumption that she was merely a civilian stumbling through a world she couldn't possibly comprehend. Without a word, she fished the folded document from her bag and presented it. Captain Hayes snatched it. He didn't just look at it. He interrogated it. He held the paper up against the glare of the sun, searching for watermarks, performing a theater of security for an audience of one. His eyes flicked from the paper to her face, lingering uncomfortably. "Brenda Lowe," he read, his tone dripping with skepticism. "Here for recruit Adam Lowe." "Yes," she said. "I know the rules, Captain. I was stationed here myself, years ago." That comment seemed to offend him. He looked at her simple attire and saw a lie. "Stationed here as what? A spouse? A contractor?" "Neither," she replied quietly. "It doesn't matter," Hayes snapped, his patience vaporizing. "You are in a restricted zone. I've given you a lawful order. If you fail to follow my instructions immediately, I will have you escorted off base by the Provost Marshal's office." The threat hung heavy in the humid air. Nearby families slowed down, their curiosity piqued by the sight of a rigid officer dressing down a quiet woman. Brenda felt the heat of their stares, a public stinging sensation she had endured too many times. She forced her voice to remain low and reasonable. "There is no need for threats, Captain. I am leaving." "It's not a threat, it's procedure," he countered, puffing out his chest. "Now, I need to see government-issued identification. Driver's license." Brenda sighed internally, a breath of sheer exasperation. This was no longer about security. It was about dominance. She produced her license. Hayes took it, his fingers grazing hers intentionally, and began a slow, meticulous comparison of the data. He was treating her like a criminal suspect rather than a guest. "Lance Corporal," Hayes barked at a passing Marine. The young man snapped to attention. "Stand watch over this individual. She is failing to comply and may require transport to the brig." "Captain, you are making a serious mistake," Brenda warned. Her voice had lost its gentle edge, replaced by a tone of absolute certainty. It wasn't a threat. It was a cold statement of fact. Hayes didn't blink. "The only mistake here, ma'am, was yours." He stepped into her personal space, his patience exhausted. "Give me your arm. We are taking a walk." He didn't wait for compliance. He reached out, clamping his hand firmly around her forearm to guide her away. As his fingers closed and pulled, the sleeve of her blue blouse rode up several inches, exposing the pale skin of her inner wrist. That was when he saw it. Etched in stark, professional black ink was a design that stopped him cold. It was a caduceus, the twin serpents of medicine, but they were not wrapped around a traditional staff. Instead, they were coiled violently around a ka-bar, the iconic fighting knife of the Marine Corps. Below the image, in small, precise lettering, were the words, "Phantom Fury, November 14th, 04. Hayes froze. For a split second, the scene around him blurred. A phantom memory triggered in his mind. A story from the lecture halls of Quantico about a battle fought while he was still in high school. He smelled dust and cordite. He heard the echo of the desperate call, "Corpsman up!" But the moment passed as quickly as it had arrived. His ego reasserted control, dismissing the flash of recognition. To him, this wasn't a badge of honor. It was a bootleg imitation, a civilian mocking the Corps with stolen valor art. "I am officially detaining you for trespassing," Hayes announced, his grip on her arm tightening. He glared at the tattoo with disdain, then snapped his head toward the young Lance Corporal. "Go to the vehicle. Get a set of flex cuffs. Now!" 50 yards away, maintaining the perimeter near the parade deck, Gunnery Sergeant Evans watched the scene unfold with narrowing eyes. He was a career Marine, his face a roadmap of desert deployments, his posture as rigid as a flagpole. He had been observing Captain Hayes, a young, zealous officer prone to treating the regulation manual like a holy text, and he didn't like what he saw. Dressing down a mother on graduation day was poor form, regardless of the infraction. Evans was about to walk over and subtly de-escalate the situation when he saw Hayes grab the woman's arm. He watched the sleeve ride up. Even from a distance, Evans's eyes, trained to spot disturbed earth from a moving convoy, caught the distinct flash of black ink on her inner wrist. He squinted, his focus sharpening like a camera lens. He saw the silhouette, the snakes, the knife. A jolt of electricity shot down his spine. It couldn't be. He abandoned his post and started walking, his pace measured but urgent. As he closed the distance, the details resolved. He read the text beneath the image. Phantom Fury. Gunnery Sergeant Evans stopped dead in his tracks. His blood ran cold. He knew that tattoo. He had seen it only once before, in a faded photograph held by a grizzled first sergeant who spoke of it in hushed, reverent tones. It wasn't standard flash art. It was a blood pact, a mark of survival and immense gratitude bestowed upon a tiny handful of Navy corpsmen who had endured the house-to-house hell of Fallujah with a specific Marine unit. He looked from the tattoo to the woman's calm, brown-haired profile, and then to Hayes' expression of arrogant certainty. Evans felt a surge of dread. Hayes wasn't just making a mistake. He was committing a sacrilege. Without a moment's hesitation, Evans turned his back to the scene and pulled his phone. He didn't call the provost marshal. He didn't call the officer of the day. He bypassed the entire chain of command and dialed a number he had used only twice in his career. The personal cell of the Depot Sergeant Major. "Sergeant Major, this is Gunny Evans," he said the moment the line clicked open, his voice low and urgent. "I apologize for the direct line, sir, but we have a critical situation. Captain Hayes is about to put flex cuffs on a civilian guest." Evans paused, taking a steadying breath. "Sergeant Major, it's Doc Lowe. I'm looking at the ka-bar caduceus on her wrist right now. It's really her." Inside the climate-controlled sanctuary of the command building, Colonel Thompson hung up the phone, his expression shifting from confusion to sharp alarm. He looked at his aide, a sharp young major seated at the terminal. "Pull the archival service record for Hospital Corpsman 2nd Class Brenda Lowe," Thompson ordered, his voice cutting through the quiet hum of the office. "Navy personnel files. Do it now." The major, sensing the rare urgency in the colonel's tone, didn't ask questions. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, accessing the secure servers. Within seconds, a profile materialized on the high-definition monitor. A service portrait from 2 decades ago filled the screen. The woman staring back was younger, her brown hair tucked strictly beneath a white navy cover, but the eyes, fierce, intelligent, and olive green, were unmistakably the same. Then, the awards history began to populate. It started with a Navy and Marine Corps Achievement Medal, followed by a Purple Heart. Then, the screen refreshed to show the highest decoration in the list: the Silver Star. The room fell into a stunned silence. Colonel Thompson and the Sergeant Major leaned in, reading the citation that glowed on the screen. For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action while serving as corpsman for 3rd Platoon, Kilo Company, 3rd Battalion, 1st Marines during Operation Phantom Fury, Fallujah, Iraq. On 14 November 2004, after a rocket-propelled grenade struck a defensive position, collapsing the roof and burying 6 Marines, Petty Officer Lowe disregarded her own safety to charge through a heavy volume of enemy machine gun fire into the unstable structure. The colonel's eyes scanned the horrific details. For 3 hours, she had moved from casualty to casualty in the dark, choking dust, using her own body to shield the wounded from falling debris and incoming rounds. The report highlighted a specific act of sheer will. She had single-handedly applied direct pressure to a severed femoral artery for over 60 minutes, refusing to be relieved or evacuated until the Marine was stabilized and moved to safety. Below the official citation were the after-action reports, handwritten notes from men who were now battalion commanders and sergeants major. They didn't use her rank. They called her the Angel of the Block. "Holy hell," the sergeant major whispered, the color draining from his face. "It's really her." Colonel Thompson straightened up, his face hardening into stone. "She is a guest of honor on my base," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "A hero of this corps is standing on the side of the road, and one of my captains is treating her like a criminal." He grabbed his cover. "Get the command vehicle. Tell Gunny Evans to hold the line." "You really have no idea who is standing in front of you, do you, son?" Brenda asked, her voice laced with a profound, ancient disappointment. Before Captain Hayes could respond, a silence fell over the street, heavier and more imposing than any shout. A black, pristine command vehicle slid to the curb, its tires rolling noiselessly over the asphalt. It carried the colonel's eagle insignia on the bumper plate. The doors opened in unison. Colonel Thompson emerged, flanked by the depot sergeant major and the major from the admin center. They moved with synchronized, predatory grace, their faces set in grim determination. Captain Hayes straightened immediately, a flicker of relief crossing his face. He assumed the cavalry had arrived to support his enforcement of the rules. "Colonel," Hayes began, stepping forward to report, "I have detained this individual for—" Colonel Thompson walked past him as if he were made of glass. The base commander marched directly to Brenda, stopping exactly 3 feet in front of her. He looked at her, at the streaks of gray in her dark brown hair, at the calm intelligence in her olive eyes. And then he did something that shattered Captain Hayes's reality. Thompson snapped his heels together, his back ramrod straight, and rendered a slow, razor-sharp salute. It was the kind of gesture usually reserved for visiting generals or Medal of Honor recipients. "Doc Lowe," the colonel's voice boomed, clear and resonant in the hush. "It is an absolute honor to have you aboard Marine Corps Recruit Depot Paris Island." Behind him, the sergeant major and the major also snapped to attention, holding their salutes. Hayes stood frozen, his mouth slightly agape, his hand still hovering near his belt where the cuffs were. Thompson lowered his hand slowly, but remained at attention. He turned his head, projecting his voice so that every onlooker, every slowing car, and specifically Captain Hayes could hear him. "For those of you unaware," the colonel announced, his tone ringing with authority, "this woman is not merely a guest. She is a recipient of the Silver Star." A gasp rippled through the gathering crowd. On November 14, 2004, inside a collapsed building in Fallujah, then Petty Officer Lowe ran through a kill zone of enemy fire to reach 6 wounded Marines, Thompson continued, his eyes locking onto Hayes with icy intensity. "She shielded them with her own body for 3 hours. She is credited with saving the lives of an entire fire team. The Marines of Kilo Company do not call her Ma'am or Mrs. Lowe. They call her the Angel of the Block." He gestured toward Brenda's wrist, where the ink was still visible. "That mark is not a violation of dress code, Captain. It is a combat honor bestowed upon her by the men she bled for. It is a symbol you should have recognized with respect, not disdain." Colonel Thompson finally turned his gaze back to Captain Hayes. His voice dropped to a low, lethal register that was far more terrifying than a scream. "Captain, you will report to my office at 1500 hours. Bring a notebook. We are going to have a very long discussion about leadership, judgment, and the mortal sin of failing to recognize a giant simply because she isn't wearing a uniform." Thompson leaned in. "You looked at a decorated combat veteran and saw a nuisance. You failed to observe. You failed to decide. Dismissed." Hayes stood paralyzed, his face a mask of dawning horror and shame. He could only manage a choked, Aye, sir." The graduation ceremony proceeded, but the atmosphere had irrevocably shifted. Brenda was escorted to the VIP box on the reviewing stand by the colonel himself. When Adam's platoon marched past, he caught his mother's eye. The look on his face was one of overwhelming awe. The stories she had told him, watered down, humble accounts of her service, suddenly felt like vast understatements. Their reunion after the ceremony was emotional, a fierce hug that bridged the gap between mother and son, veteran and recruit. Later that afternoon, at the reception, a humbled Captain Hayes approached her. He stood before her, his posture stripped of arrogance, his hat in his hands. "Ma'am," he began, his voice quiet, "there is no excuse for my behavior. I was unprofessional, I was judgmental, and I was wrong. I am truly, deeply sorry." Brenda looked at him, really looked at him with her warm, dark eyes. She didn't see a villain. She saw a young officer who had just learned the hardest lesson of his career. "Apology accepted, Captain," she said softly. "Let me give you one piece of advice. Before you check a person's ID, or their pass, or the insignia on their collar, look them in the eyes first. You'll learn a lot more about who they are." In the months that followed, a new training module was quietly introduced for all junior officers at Paris Island. It focused on veteran interactions and the dangers of assumption. It was never officially named, but every lieutenant and captain knew where it came from. It was a small institutional course correction, a legacy of wisdom planted on a hot asphalt path by a woman with a simple blue top and a tattoo of snakes and steel.